everybody, and welcome to Prepare Like a Pro. My name is Grandmaster Illia Nyzhnyk, and I'll be your host today. Been a while since I've done one of these, so let's jump right into it. What I have prepared for us today is 3 examples from my own games. Oh, I should also mention the topic of today. It's not just Prepare Like a Pro, but I went a bit deeper and chose a more specific topic, being Prepare Like a Pro in terms of engine preparation. Right? Title players are known to rely on engine prep, sometimes a bit too much. So this is why I wanted to focus on pros and cons of engine preparation as it comes to, trying to catch your opponent by surprise, and what are potential caveats with that strategy. So, as I said, 3 of my games, 2 games where the engine prep worked out in my favor, and 1 game where it backfired. So this first game I played against a strong international master a couple of years back. The opening, I would say, was nothing too surprising. We have transposed into a position that most of you have probably seen or have played in your own games before. This is a very typical Queen's Gambit decline position where black has options. Black can either take on c4, which can sometimes lead to more aggressive routes, like let's say the Vienna Gambit. If any of you are familiar, this is the Vienna Gambit. Oh, this mouse is a little bit too fast for me. Oops. So in the Vienna Gambit, white ends up sacrificing a pawn for increased development rate, and here we are with white being somewhat ahead in development, but black obviously maintains a material advantage, and the game becomes a lot more dynamic. That's one of the options. Other common options is to just simply play bishop e7, following the well-known routes of Queen's Gambit declined. There's been millions and millions of games here, with black's results being pretty okay. And judging by my own personal experience, I struggle quite a bit playing against Queen's Gambit declined because of how sturdy of an opening it is. Trying to win, trying to beat the Queen's Gambit declined has costed me a lot of points because I usually overextend, and that's the advantage of the opening, because the positions that arise, something along these lines. This is actually, I like including rook to c1 as an option, and for example, this is the line that I once played back in 2011 during Tata Steel Tournament, which is one of the more prestigious events out there. Back in those days, it was held in the small village, village in the Netherlands called Wijk. I'm not sure if they're holding. Well, actually, it's actually right now they're playing Tata Steel as we speak. Well, not at this very moment, but these days they are hosting the event. I'm not sure if it's been hosted in Wijk or elsewhere, but I have fond memories of the event. And one of the games I've had in this opening, one of the more memorable games I've had in this opening happened during Tata Steel Group B, where I unfortunately lost the game as far as I remember, and it wasn't fun, but that just kind of summarizes my experience playing against the Queen's Gambit declined. So Queen's Gambit declined is option number 2. Obviously, there are a couple of other options such as bishop to b4 or c6, which are bishop to b4 is a transposition into Rogozin variation, and c6 is black's attempt to transpose into more of a semi-Slav structures. None of these were chosen by my opponent, who ended up playing a6. Has anybody encountered this sneaky-looking move in your games? Anybody? Nobody? Well, this move may seem weird at first, but it actually has some practical uses. So, because black essentially claims that white will end up taking on d5 at some point, the move a6 can be used to take away the b5 square, which is oftentimes used by white in their attempt to play the pawn minority attack on the queen side. So the move all in itself is a useful one. It's just a little bit weird to see the move being played in this specific move order. Halting development just to play a6 may seem weird at first. So during my home prep, I determined that this is my opponent's mainstream opening, right? He's been playing this for a long time, and I had to find a way to kind of surprise him and take him out of his comfort zone. So I came up with this sideline, I would say, and played c5. The move c5 is an attempt to seize a lot of space on the queen side specifically. So something that black definitely wants to avoid is this type of position, right? So this is something that black should never ever do. Play c6. At first sight, it may seem pretty good, yeah, because black has just created a pretty impressive pawn chain. A not so good point about this is that black is going to be severely lacking space. And black has actually no way of combating this pawn structure now. As soon as they play c6, now if black tries to undermine, right? If black feels like their position is getting scuffed, they might try to undermine with b6, which is now a lot less effective. This b6 undermining move is only effective if you can then guarantee yourself playing c5 in the near future, right? So in this case, as soon as white knight gets to a4, black can no longer guarantee that they're going to play c5 anytime soon, because white is seizing control over the c5 square, as you can see. So this is not the only thing that white can do actually against b6. Now, as black has included c6, we can meet b6 with b4, and we can also maintain the bind, right? Because what white has created, let's not blunder a rook, shall we? What white has created is essentially a bind against black's pieces on the queen side. So something along these lines may happen, where it may seem that black has made some progress by trading off pieces on the queen side, but reality is such that these changes, these trades, are only going to be in white's favor. So for example, something like this can happen, and white will be in full control over the open files on the queen side.
Was your prep to play c5 on bishop e7, or was it specifically against a6?
So this is specifically against a6, because if a6 is not included, this is kind of the whole point. If a6 is not included, then I actually simply don't have time to play c5. So for example, if you try to play c5 here, after b6, I don't want to take on b6, because taking means that black recaptures toward the center, opens up the a file, so this kind of trade is generally going to be better for black. So the only reasonable thing here for me to do would be to play b4, but then after a5, I can no longer keep the chain going because my rook is unprotected. This would have worked if my bishop was elsewhere, because then my queen protects the rook, right? So I can't do this because I end up dropping the rook on a1. And therefore, my pawn chain breaks, and that's really bad news. I'm pretty sure this just leads to material losses for white, because a5 is going to fall any time now. c5 is a typical idea. Unfortunately for white, if they ever try to play c5, actually there are some cases where c5 is common. Like for example, here I believe after c6, c5 is one of the moves white can make. And there are a couple of problems with this. Obviously b6 is a natural response, but there's also this move knight h5, which forces white to trade off one of their best pieces, aka the dark squared bishop. It can't hide, it can only end up on g3. If it goes to e5, it still gets kicked. Wait, actually no, here it gets, not by f6, excuse me. f6 is a horrible, horrible mistake, because now white wins a piece this way. So it's just simple knight d7. I'm pretty sure that does the job. This is why I believe white ends up playing bishop g3. I'm pretty sure this is still opening theory. And then the problem here is that black will begin threatening e5 breakthroughs, and because of lack of the dark squared bishop, white can't really deal with that. So c5, while possible, is rarely good for white. But in this concrete scenario where black plays a6 and holds their development, now c5 works out. And obviously the big question is what happens if black immediately fights against it with b6? And this is where my opening prep came through. So I proceed by taking on b6. Now black could definitely take it back, but something interesting happens here. This position is essentially a transposition from the exchange Slav variation. So if we go all the way back, I'm going to show you in a second. We go all the way back here, and if black, let's say, plays an exchange Slav, well, if black plays Slav defense and white goes for the exchange Slav variation, in this case, black almost never wants to end up playing e6. Why is it? Can somebody tell me why e6 is never played in these types of positions? There's a very, very well-defined logical reason behind it.
The light squared bishop is atrocious.
Right, exactly. So the bishop has nowhere to go. If e6 does go through, black ends up putting the bishop onto b7, but even there has been completely locked in by black's own pawn chain. So the position we've just seen, the position that could have appeared in my game had black taken on b6, it's just a much worse version of exchange Slav for black. This is why they never want to do this. So the move is c5 here, and this is the beginning of a pretty complex line, part of which is, we can call part of it an engine line. So taking on c5 is basically playing into black's plans, because bishop takes c5, my pawn is about to fall, and black ends up having a strong central pawn formation. So this is definitely a possibility, but there are better ways to apply pressure for white. I end up playing bishop f4, which forces black to make a choice. It forces black to make a decision. Either black goes ahead and takes on b6 immediately, or black makes this move bishop d6. So there's only two options here. The reason for that is because I'm threatening bishop to c7. It's such an unorthodox threat, but that's what's being threatened. If my bishop ends up on c7, I'm never going to drop the b6 pawn ever again, right? So black has to make up his mind. Taking on b6 leads to knight a4. As far as I remember, these positions are also okay for black, but black has to deal with some immediate complications. Black would be better off knowing what's going on and coming prepared, equipped with some engine prep here. But bishop d6 is just a much simpler way to proceed. That's what my opponent did without much thinking. And I'm pretty sure that I've seen him having a game in this very line. So when I was looking at possibilities, I decided to go deeper and see if I can surprise him somewhere along the way. So I go ahead and take on d6, the trade goes through. I take on c5, and then here I play the move queen to d4. So far, it's been looking like a desperate attempt to save the extra pawn, right? Because I'm still up a pawn, I'm desperately trying to save it with everything I've got. So queen d4 is definitely such an attempt. Unfortunately for white, black has a very, very simple game, right, going on. Black goes queen d6, and sometimes you may get worried that you're down material, but this is not the case for black here. Black essentially claims that, well, my center is better, like black's center is better right now. They have more central pawns. Obviously, the center is only as good as the amount of space it helps you consume. So if black wants to make their central pawns work for him, he needs to ensure that the pawns can start moving up. It is fairly easy to do. The only move that's necessary is going to be something like knight bd7, maybe even knight c6, and then the pawns will just start rolling. I like knight bd7 better because it also helps black capture the b6 pawn, right? So knight bd7 is a multi-purpose move. This means that as white, I don't really have any time to waste. Even though I'm up a pawn right now, and it may feel like, I have time to play with because black is under pressure. This pawn is not really being used for anything, right? In a few more moves, as soon as black goes knight bd7, and if black really wants to take the pawn, so let's just make a couple of random moves so I can demonstrate what I'm talking about, right? So knight bd7. If I'm still trying to keep the pawn alive, I don't see any other way other than knight a4 to keep holding the pawn, and then rook b8. And this is pretty much it, right? I don't have any more defenders to throw in for the protection of the b6 pawn. So what essentially is going to happen is that I've invested my pieces into defense of that pawn, and it's going to fall anyway. So everything I've done up until now just kind of goes to waste. What am I left with? Nothing much really to show for it. Black's next move is likely going to be e5. My pieces will be gradually pushed back, and that's not great, right? So this is where I need to be very, very precise. And this position has happened in many games prior to this one, but at the time I was kind of looking through the possibilities, and I came up with this move e4, which was one of Engine's recommendations. I believe it wasn't even the top recommendation, but I found it very interesting, and it seemed logical to me that if I want to make something happen, I need to be very aggressive, right? So the move e4 has a threat of e5, meaning that knight bd7 is no longer black's option. So by playing e4, I'm immediately removing one of the possibilities that my opponent has. Taking the pawn is instantly losing, right, because d5 is pinned. So now black is down a piece.
Knight c6 is obviously.
Knight c6 is the obvious response. Yes, knight c6 is a must. Black simply does not have any other move to make if they want to keep the game going. So knight c6. Now this is where the game gets a little bit crazy. Luckily for me, I was well equipped with an engine prep, and I was not worried very much, because I knew that the rising position is going to be in my favor. Well, it's per most engine analysis, with the correct play from both sides, the resulting position is going to be a draw, but my opponent would have to know approximately 15 first line engine moves beginning from here, just to make sure he guarantees a draw. So d4 came through, right? If black takes on e4 here, I believe I had a game against somebody. I played against some very strong grandmaster in a blitz game recently, and he went ahead and took on e4. I think the problem with this is that I don't have to take back immediately. I can reposition my knight so that my f3 knight ends up taking on e4, and I'm pretty sure that makes a big difference. By playing knight d2, I can also look to castle long, which doesn't seem like a move we want to make ever, because it feels like castling long results in our king going into a more exposed side of the board. But it surprisingly works out, because castling is not only to make your king safe, but also to activate your rook. So long castle is one of the main ideas here. So d takes e4 is one of the possibilities. By the way, the black's position is relatively okay if they do end up taking, but obviously the main move is to play d4 and fork the two of my pieces here. I think I only have one possible response here. It doesn't seem that way. It feels like maybe I have moves like rook d1 or long castle as possible candidate moves, but that is not true. Can somebody tell me why defending this way would be subpar at best? I'm pretty sure the resulting position is just practically lost for white. It is not a tactic. Black's next move is not a tactic. It's just a simple defensive move that also happens to be very, very good in practice.
E5,
just
right?
e5, yeah. Just defend the d4 pawn, create a pawn chain, And the reason why I believe this position is just lost for white is because there is no way for me to get rid of the d4 pawn, so my pieces are begin to suffocate, right? The d4 is just exerting a lot of pressure. My b6 is going to be gone any moment now, right? Black can just go rook b8. If they really have to, they will support with knight d7. They will remove the b6 pawn and they will start attacking my king. In the meantime, black is just going to castle short, right? So there is nothing I can do. I have run out of options. What is the alternative? If
E5, right?
E5 for white, correct. So we are hitting it right back. Black is forking, and we are forking as well. This endgame is surprisingly not good for black. So I would actually be very, very happy to end up with this endgame if my opponent had decided to do so. But unfortunately for me, he didn't. But this endgame is surprisingly good for white. The reason for that is because our king is in the center. It's an endgame, and our king is in the center. It's perfect. This pawn is a nuisance. Actually, it's a lot more than just a nuisance. It's going to promote if black is not careful. In general, our pieces are way more active than black's. So going here would mean I wanna believe it would mean inevitable demise for black. But you never know. There's always a way to screw up, as all you guys know. So my opponent didn't do it. He did the obvious thing. He played queen b4, and maybe at this point he was feeling very good about his position, thinking that, oh, well, he's about to win material. And he would be correct in assuming that. Because the only thing I can do is I can only remove the obstacle by taking on d4. Now, queen d4 once again results in some endgame that's very favorable for white. So my opponent goes ahead and takes on d4 with the knight. This horse has been very, very annoying. Knight c2 is something we cannot ignore. So here it comes, long castle with a double attack. Now both knights are in danger. Losing one of these knights, I think we would immediately pronounce black dead. And the reason for that is because I'm up 2 pawns, right? If black loses one of their extra pieces, they end up being down 2 pawns in an endgame, right? As soon as I take on d4 with the queen, the queen trade is to follow, and the game just ends. So the game must go on. Knight f5, hitting my queen. This is one of the first tricky moments. Where should we put our queen?
I was calculating queen g5, but...
So what happens after queen g5? Let's see.
Right, I was calculating queen g5, queen g4.
Ooh.
And I was not sure who was better there. That's what I'm
Well,
trying to figure out.
well, the thing is that if we fail to create enough play, we're just down a piece. So after queen g4, if you don't see any more annoying moves we can make, I want to say that we're in trouble. There are going to be couple of points, right? We know that we cannot trade queens unless we are winning our missing piece back, and we know that we cannot put our king in more danger than what black's king is going through. Queen f3, I see the suggestion in chat, queen to f3, which is correct. It is yet another double attack. So I was oh, go ahead.
Knight d5?
Knight d5, yeah, he did, did he play? No, he didn't play knight d5. Knight d5 is the first line, and knight d5 is how black survives. I was unconsciously, during the game, I was unconsciously hoping that my opponent would be good enough to find knight d5, and the line that arises is out of this world. Why am I saying that? Well, because
Knight takes bishop b7. Or
bishop b7 unfortunately runs into knight c7 discovery
sure.
check.
Yeah. So you have to take.
Have to take. Yeah. Queen takes d5 with yet another double attack.
Yeah.
The checkmating threat, and queen takes e8. Now black just goes ahead and castles.
Sure.
Well, we have to, right? Because if we don't take this, we are down a piece, and our king is about to get checkmated. So we have to capture the material, and now black has only move to make a draw, which is knight to e3. Seems like a bogus move. Like, why would we Why would we give up?
Bishop f5 is really serious.
Bishop f5 is unfortunately not that serious, because after bishop f5, queen c6, it may seem like you're trapping the queen, but your 8th rank is not doing you any favors, right? Takes, rook d8, and we win.
Right. Guess we don't have bishop e4 there either.
Bishop e4 is just queen c7. So as long as white queen stays on the c file, it's over. So black does not have a luxury of playing bishop f5. Instead, they have to start attacking immediately, and queen c5 is the way to go. Now, as far as I remember, both king d2 and king b1 are equally drawish. But I would personally, because I've spent some time analyzing this position, I would be very happy. It's just, you know, the chess artist inside me would be very happy to end up with this position. Why am I saying that? Well, because in this position I'm down the whole queen, but it's still equal. And the reason for that is because my pawn, the passer, the b7 pawn, is the guy who's going to make all the difference. And the rook c7, queen f8. If I'm not mistaken, this is it. Or maybe is it? Wait. I think rook b8 is probably wrong. There shouldn't be, like, because rook b8 seems like we're getting it too good to be true for white, because rook c8 now is just a winning idea. But there should be a, I think it's rook f8. Yeah, right, it's rook f8. There it is, rook f8. And now rook c1, black does not have to be as worried about rook c8 anymore, so black can end up having their queen on the b file. Now the rook is hanging, yeah, so we have to play rook b3. And the funny thing about this whole position is that neither side has a way to make progress. Well, the engine was showing, the engine told me that the way to play this position for a win for white is to do this. We can't play rook c8
right, until our king is safe.
Unless the king is safe. But even though if our king is safe, there's going to be different problems. Like, for example, black can end up playing a5, a4, and then we're going to have some other checks we have to be watching out for. So this position is a dynamic equality, but I was looking forward to playing it during the game, because at this point, if you go all the way back, at this point, I was already about 30 to 35 minutes ahead on time, and knowing that my opponent would have to find another like 6 to 7 precise moves just to get to the dynamically balanced position where my opponent is up a queen, it would probably take him like the rest of his time. So I was really looking forward to playing that endgame, thinking that maybe I can like outsmart him somewhere playing against an extra queen. But unfortunately, it didn't happen. My opponent made an inferior move, rook b8, and the game ended. It didn't end as quickly as it should have. This position is now winning for me because his king is very, very weak. He doesn't really want to end up castling because he castles into the open g file. He doesn't really want to end up keeping the king on e8 because I have a very simple plan where I'm doubling the rooks and I'm getting in there. So this position is really bad for black, but I didn't play this very precisely. I think bishop e4 is already a wrong move. I'm giving him a trade for no reason, right? In this position, I am the one in command. I'm the one attacking. I'm the one who decides the flow of the game. I shouldn't be trading my pieces. I should be keeping them on the board. So bishop e4 was the first inaccuracy, and yeah, this allowed them to escape. Actually, if I just play queen h3, I think castling eventually ends up with me playing g4. So I have to move the rook away, I think, at first. And then g4 is a very, very big threat that he can't deal with. So this position is just immediately lost. So this was my big mistake where I played bishop e4. I'm still not sure why. And it took me a long time. I did eventually end up winning. But this position, for example, is already unclear. Because it seems that I'm still in command, but my opponent just has simple ways to defend. Like, let's say king g7, queen e7. I'm simply lacking pieces to make the final push. Time trouble was what killed my opponent, not my skill. still unclear, and then somewhere here, yeah, so he takes on g4, and now he's lost. He took the g4 pawn, which opened things up for my attack on the g file, and you know, I calculated up until here where his knight gets trapped, and yeah, it was all over. So here he resigned. Still, you know, I want to say I got lucky that he did end up playing the line he usually plays. You know, it's always a risk whenever you prepare something very, very specific against your opponent, and they end up not playing it, or they feel that something is off, and they end up switching things up last minute, and then you kind of feel upset, you know, borderline, that you spent so much time preparing this, you know, certain line and it didn't work out. So having options for cases like these is always recommended. But this is one of the good examples, right? This is a good example where it works out. You know, you've prepared the line, your opponent went into it, you caught them by surprise, you got a good position at the opening, you won, right? It's a smooth sailing. Unfortunately, sometimes things don't go as planned, because.
Let me ask you a quick question. So, is this not like a huge problem later on? Because anybody that looks at this game knows they're never gonna go into this line ever again. So, isn't like this only gonna work one time and then that's it? Or
Yeah, it's a good question. It depends on. Well, you kind of have to get lucky in terms of your opponent doing their due diligence with the home prep. Some people are very easygoing when it comes to preparation for serious classical games. They don't necessarily check everything, and sometimes you play somebody who is very diligent and checks everything, you know, and they even check their own lines. And I've run into a couple of cases where I would prepare some rare line that I've never played before. I played it and my opponent knew it better than I was, than I did, having prepared. You know, he just knew it better. He was like, "Oh, I checked it before the game." I'm like, "How? I've never played this. I prepared it specifically against you." And he's like, "Yeah, I thought you might play it, so I checked it beforehand." I'm like, "What? That's so unlucky." So it happens, right? There's always a risk, but that's not just the only issue with taking such a risk. Another issue is that you prepare something where you don't have an experience, right? You found this new opening idea, but you haven't practiced it enough, right? So you end up having to play a position or a structure you might have never encountered before. And this is what I wanted to kind of display here. This is my game against a good friend of mine, international master Tianqi Wang. He goes by Steve, and he also works at the St. Louis Chess Club. You guys might have seen him around. He works as a TD, as far as I know, for some of the local tournaments. So Steve had an exceptional game here. I was once again white. Hello, Chess Flower. Sorry, guys. I'm seeing you guys have been commenting online. I wasn't really paying attention. Did anybody have any questions? I hope not. No questions, it seems. All right. So yet again, Queen's Gambit declined. You know, continuing the trend, my trend of playing bad games against Queen's Gambit declined. What I do know about this opening is that people who play Queen's Gambit declined with black pieces are looking for a more of a mild, safe game, and they can sometimes get very uncomfortable if you suddenly change the flow of the game into an aggressive state. So it may seem close to impossible to do it, right? Like, because Queen's Gambit declined is known to be so safe and sturdy. So how do we ever make it into an aggressive, aggressive openings? But there is a sideline which I've been playing for quite some time, and this was the game where I have decided to make engine modifications to the way I've been playing the sideline, right? So the sideline goes like this. White ends up playing queen c2. So the c2 square is pretty common. This is where white's queen ends up pretty much in any case. The reason for that is because white usually tries to build this battery with the queen and a light squared bishop. So the c2 is arguably the best square for the queen. You just don't see it being developed there so early, but there is a reason. And the reason that I want to castle long as quickly as possible. You guys can probably already see where this is going. But castling long, I'm making it into opposite side castling, which is known to be very, very aggressive. The openings where you have opposite side castling cases, well, the most well-known opening like that is Sicilian defense. Like in half of the lines of Sicilian defense, you end up with opposite side castling, and the game becomes crazy, right? With opposite side castling, you're trying to kill each other. You're just throwing your pieces at your opponent's king, sometimes without any thought behind it, and hoping it works. Obviously, there's a bit more strategy behind it than that, but that's how I've been seeing it. So bishop g5, h6, and this is where my modification comes in. So previously, I've only been playing this line by taking on f6 and then long castling, until I discovered the problem. I'm gonna show some of some of the issues with my opening prep. So the problem here is that White's plan is almost always going to be exclusively about pawn avalanche on the king side. Well, occasionally we might want to play e4, but that kind of goes against the whole point. White mostly wants to play on the king side, and there's a problem with this pawn avalanche idea. So for example, if black makes a reasonable move, let's say knight c6, the pawn avalanche can always be met with this very, very annoying idea of g6 and then bishop g7. The reason why this is so annoying is because now either one of the pawns we push, black pushes the opposite pawn. If we go h5, black goes g5. Our goal is to expose black's king side. We can't do that anymore, right? So the pawns end up in a bind no matter what we do. And that's a problem for us. Black's position is otherwise just fine. So if this idea doesn't work out, black doesn't really have anything to worry about. And Chess Lover in our Twitch chat has correctly identified the improvement. And the improvement was that I figured I don't have to take. I can begin by playing h4. The bishop it's invulnerable. Anytime black decides to take the bishop, the game ends almost immediately, because h7 is super exposed. I'm pretty sure that at this point, black's best shot would be to just give the piece back. Knight e4 doesn't save black. Black simply does not have pieces to help the king escape. Or let's say g6, queen h4, and the king is going to get mated either way. So if black does decide to take on g5, at this point they have to give the knight back. But with the h file being as exposed as it is, it's only helped white, right? Black didn't really get anything out of this trade. And white has gotten an open h file for their attack. So it makes no sense for black to ever take this bishop. So after h4, the funny thing happens. I no longer have to touch the bishop ever again, right? Because black taking the bishop is always going to be in my favor. I can focus on other things. So the game went on. My opponent played knight b7. I played e3, which is a move that white almost always makes early. It helps defend the c4. It gets the bishop ready to get developed to d3. And Steve plays c5, which is one of the best responses, actually. So as soon as I played h4, there should be a click in everyone's head. What is the click? The click is that h4 comes with the realization that you will never castle short ever again as white, right? As soon as you make the move h4, hoping to keep the bishop on g5, this means that the rook cannot leave the h file anymore. We cannot castle short anymore. The only way we can castle is long. What happens if we castle long? Well, Steve is getting ready to fight back. He has been run over on the king side. He is fighting back. He's going to start launching his own pawns at my king as soon as I castle. And that is the only right way to do it. So here it comes. I castle long. He goes ahead and takes on c4. Taking on c4 may seem like an inaccuracy, but actually he can do that. I'm not sure if I took. I did take, and he goes queen a5. So me having the bishop on c4 only helps his pawns advance faster, right? Because he wants to throw his pawns at me. My bishop is on the way. This is a moment where this gets crazy. While this position is actually very, very good for white, it is only good for white in one specific case, which I didn't recognize. So next couple of moves are pretty much 4. So Steve goes knight b6, hitting both my bishop and my pawn. I go d6. He takes on d6. Taking on c4 is a really bad idea. This immediately loses the game. Doesn't seem that bad until we see bishop takes f6, g takes, and knight to e4 with a double attack that black has no defense against. So this is just over instantly. This is why the d6 pawn needs to go. So Steve correctly decides to take on d6. I take his knight on f6. He takes back, and this is the position where I spent 40 minutes of my time feeling. I had this feeling in my bones that this is not right. His king side is way too exposed. Yes, I don't have an open g file to take full advantage of it, but it's not right. You know, he doesn't have enough pieces helping his king defend himself, right? There's nothing there. There should be some kind of finisher. And I have seen the correct move. I've spent, as far as I know, spent like over 20 minutes calculating the correct move, but the lines were so difficult that I failed to understand that the move is actually winning for me. This is the only time, and oftentimes, well, I kind of got lucky that I got into a winning position. This position is winning for white. I got lucky that I even got here, because it could have been much worse. I couldn't even have gotten here in the first place had Steve been more accurate with his counterplay on the queen side, you know. But he was kind of, you know, caught aback, and it gave me a shot. But unfortunately, certain positions are so difficult to calculate, and I'm pretty sure I've shown this exact position a couple of times in some of my lectures previously. Last year, Chess Lover remembers it. It works. I'm not sure if you have just, you know, shot your shot, or if you've remembered this exact position. But there's only one way to win for white. Would any of you like to give it a shot? I don't think it's possible to calculate. I couldn't calculate it. It's like a 12 move line.
Calculating like knight g5.
And that you will be correct.
f5.
You will be correct. Knight g5 is the only way to keep making progress, right? Because what knight g5 does is it obviously threatens a simple.
If he takes, we get our rook in, right?
It's over.
Yeah.
This is immediately over f5, and actually our queen gets transferred, and black doesn't have enough time to defend.
Right.
So black cannot be taking on g5.
Right. It has to be f5.
Has to be f5. Yes. Has to be f5.
And then
And this is.
I was gonna try queen e2, but this is already.
Queen e2 just takes.
I was gonna try queen h5 and just all in, but.
Unfortunately, this is as much as you're gonna get.
There's no g4, but.
It's a bit too slow. Actually, you're getting mated
yeah.
yourself.
Yeah.
Black is now faster.
I mean, it's definitely serious.
It is. No, the knight g5, I was immediately looking at knight g5, but what I couldn't understand, actually, so pair is saying takes, here, and suggests rook d8, and says that maybe the king can run off. I'm afraid not. I'm going to check you. If you go king e8, I will have one final check, well, not a final check, but one of the few last checks, and the king is dead. And if you run over to d7, I can take here, and then take the rook. Now I have gotten my material back, and the black's king is still in the middle. So, you know, what is there to say? The game is going to be over any time now. So taking on g5 is, you know, not good news for black. f5 needs to be played, and this is what really caught me off guard, because the move f5 just couldn't make it work. I tried so hard and got so far in my calculations, but in the end it didn't even matter, because I couldn't find a finisher. I couldn't find a simple tactic. I got to the right position, but couldn't calculate 2 extra moves to help myself win the game. What am I talking about here? Well, this is what I'm talking about. So this is the line, right? At this point, we are doing a little desperado. Bishop takes e6 is called a desperado because we know the bishop is going to be gone, right? If you're doing the even trade of bishops, the c4 bishop is going to be gone. So we're selling its life for us as high of a price as we can. Takes on d6. Now black benefits a lot from this move because it forces the white rook back. This is the first point where I was very unhappy. Why? Well, because I was unhappy that I had to bring one of my pieces backwards. In my mind, I'm attacking. During the attack, you're not supposed to move your pieces backwards. You're not supposed to follow your opponent's game flow, right? Because my opponent is forcing my rook back. What am I doing, you know? And then at this point, this is the position that I've gotten to in my calculations. In my mind, I'm trying to play queen h5 and checkmate, but I can never do that because b2 is always hanging. My own king is suddenly unsafe, and I cannot untangle. I cannot force black to move both queen and the knight away. So I was looking at this position for a while now, and I was checking this move. I'm like, okay, what am I threatening? How can I ever make progress if I can't can't bring my queen in there?
Right. Yeah, rook h8.
Rook h4 is too slow.
Rook h8.
Okay, you're just better. You're just better.
It's obvious to see it here.
Is it?
It's very.
I couldn't see it. I got in here.
But
Oh,
10 moves ago.
Okay.
Course, yeah.
Well,
I'm seeing it here. Like, yeah, queen h5, queen g6.
Yes. Yeah. This wins by force. Unfortunately, rook h8, another
but like,
sack.
When you seeing that now, h5 f5, yeah, of course, yeah.
I was fully expecting myself to see this. This is not a rocket science type of tactic, right? We're in any attack, you're just throwing your pieces at your opponent, specifically at the king. The concept of material, it's been erased, right? We don't care about material. What we care about is whether we can checkmate or not. So rook h8 does that. Takes queen h5 check, queen h6 check, and actually the coolest checkmate I've ever seen in the middle of the board was rook d8 in the end. Or if black king goes the other way, then it gets checkmated in the corner, like so. Rook h4 gains tempo. Yeah, well, rook h4 is too slow. Yeah, it doesn't work. I tried making it work, but it just doesn't work because black connects the rooks and it's over. We can't win anymore, surprisingly. So this is the only time. It was a very time-sensitive calculation. This is the only time where rook h8 works, because, excuse me, as soon as black goes bishop b7, rook h8 no longer works because black is taking care of that d8 square. Wait, no, it should. Wait. It still works, yeah. Wait a second. For some reason, this was time-sensitive. Let's see. Here. It still works. Okay, now I'm just upset. Oh wait, okay. Well, no, I just made the most horrible, the most horrific move ever, g3, because now I can't even play queen h1 check. So, sorry, rook h1 checkmate. So this now becomes okay for black just because the h1 is unavailable. But if I make, wait, do I have any other nothing move I can make?
After bishop, after bishop b7, then when the king is on e8, we don't have rook d1 mate anymore.
Well, but we have queen takes e6 mate, because the bishop was defending the e6.
Right.
Right. That's what I was thinking. But actually, it still works. So it makes it even worse. It makes this mess even worse because I'm just winning. Well, in all fairness, the engine, when I checked this position with an engine, the engine said that, oh well, but black can do this, and then black can try to survive this endgame, which is, funnily enough, a materially balanced endgame. But if you take a look at the pieces, right, difference between pieces, black's pieces are just completely stuck, not moving anywhere, while we're still maintaining the same ideas, right? We're going to double on the h file, we're going to bring in the knight. It's not pretty. So that's about that. And unfortunately, after having spent over 35 minutes calculating all kinds of things, I have settled on arguably one of the worst options, which is to play knight e4 and just trying to keep the pieces on the board, not realizing that black's attack is now suddenly coming faster. My king is a lot more unsafe than white's all of a sudden. I'm losing a2. As soon as I lose a2, the queen a1 is just, it's a killer move. I tried. It doesn't work. I'm missing pieces. I'm missing at least a couple more moves to make any of the tricks work. I want to do something along these lines, but obviously I have no time to do any of that. I'm getting mated quite literally. Black just needs 2 more moves and I'm mated, and I'm nowhere near. So I do one final desperate attempt to save myself with some, I don't know, maybe some checkmating threats. But Steve is just, you know, heartless killer. Queen a5 figures me out. Now I can't even move this rook in because there is queen e1 check, and then I'm losing all my pawns, all by force, because everything comes with a check. So the game ends. Actually, I almost flagged. I think I played the move f3 with like 1 second on my clock and realized that I'm not threatening anything. He can just take, and because there's always checks, my rook can never reach the 7th rank, so I resigned. This is one of the cons of relying too much on engine prep. You need to kind of know your capabilities. If you're going for too crazy of a game, oftentimes you're gonna suffer as much as your opponent. Sometimes whenever you play something unusual, something unknown, for both your opponent and it can backfire, and you kind of have to have mercy on yourself while preparing. And this is what looks like we don't have much time left, but this is what I want to quickly mention for this 3rd game, where I believe this type of opening prep is kind of the easiest to navigate. So here I'm playing, this game happened fairly recently during the US Masters 2025, so a couple of months back. One of the better games I've played. I'm not playing very good chess these days, but this one was one of the better games I've had in a while. I used this weird idea that I've stolen from Grandmaster Illia. You guys must know who Levon is. One of the best players in the world. Lives, a couple of blocks away from here. Nicest guy I've ever met. I've stolen this idea from one of his games during European team championship, I believe. And the idea of a3 is quite funny. If black fights for the center, white ends up going queen h5. This is like a reversed Scotch. So if we go back, and I'm going to demonstrate what I mean. So if we do Scotch right here, right, queen h4 is actually not a good idea. Queen h4 wins black a pawn. This is like when I was little, when I was like 5 years old, just beginning to play chess, my coach showed me this line and told me, "Oh, play this. People who play Scotch, they always lose the pawn, and you're just gonna win games easily." What he didn't tell me was that the winning the pawn comes at a steep price. The price being my king ends up on d8. There's no other way for me to defend c7 other than king d8. So black ends up having no ability to castle and having the king in the middle of the board, only having a pawn to show for it. It's not worth it, actually. So now back to my game. The idea of a3 is to get the same position but in reverse. The only difference is that there is no knight b4, so we're ending up with an extra pawn. This position is actually also fine for black because they're getting a lot of play. They're going to get some development advantage after giving up a pawn, so it's actually also fine. But Levon won a nice game in this line. So I stole the idea from him, and then my opponent didn't go for it. He just made normal moves, and now he plays d5. So as he has developed his knight to c6, he goes ahead and plays d5. But here comes the part 2 of this line's idea. White ends up going bishop g5. Now this pawn is in trouble. If black goes d4, knight d5 has some annoying pin. By the way, according to the engine, this is one of the best ways for black to play against this. And the engine is completely unfazed. It just claims that, oh, well, you're going to be fine. Just play this, have double pawns, and you're going to be doing just fine. for a human being, going here without any prior knowledge or without having practiced this position seems very scary, because you have just created a bunch of positional weaknesses for yourself, and these are long term. They're not going to go away unless you do something about it. Probably trying to play a 5 would be it, but it's going to take black a while to get it done. So my opponent didn't do it. He just took it easy. He took on e4, and then he transposed into this endgame. I kind of enjoyed playing this endgame. White does not have a big advantage in this case. It's a normal looking position. It's a pretty symmetrical endgame, yeah. But I do have some annoying things I can do. For example, this line, right? So I take on f6, I go knight d5, hitting both the bishop and the pawn. If black goes back, there's a problem with this. Can somebody tell me what the problem is? Very simple.
I mean, that's got to be bishop c6,
yeah.
but bc6?
bc6, but yeah, but now we have something to play for, right? This is a long-term advantage, a long-term disadvantage that black has. Yeah, just taking on c6, and if black takes back with the bishop, obviously we're just we're gonna steal the pawn on e5. But if pawn takes c6 now, this is a long-term problem. Yes, black does have a bishop pair in an open position, but the pawn structure and this being so close to the real endgame makes it so that we have something to look forward to. Yeah. So over here, my opponent went into a different kind of a long-term positional disadvantage, having doubled his pawns on the f file. Unfortunately, I cannot quite get these pawns to remain in place because f5 is coming in, and it's very, very hard for me to stop it. So I tried my best, but I didn't succeed. Endgame, right? And black goes f5. This position is drawish, right? This endgame is drawish, and yet only I can win. Why am I saying that? Anybody? There's one simple reason why only white can win this endgame, unless white hangs something, and loses a piece or whatnot.
Black has 3 pawn islands, and we have 2.
Black has 3 pawn islands, and we have 2, correct. And it's a big disadvantage for black, because most pawn endgames are going to be tricky at best for black. So keeping this in mind, I was fully expected my opponent to play f5 at some point, and he did. So somewhere here, he could wait no longer, and he had played f5. This pawn endgame is still drawish, but only if black calculates precisely for about 15 moves straight.
Every king and pawn ending ever.
Right, exactly. I know, right? So why is this so bad for black? Well, because the pawns are so separated that most of the time, I'm going to have Zugzwang possibilities, right? What is Zugzwang? Well, black will get themselves in a spot where there's no good move they can make. It's very, very easy for black to get themselves Zugzwanged, and I'm going to demonstrate. So this is actually the point where I think my opponent should be playing a5 already. I know it's scary because his king is far, so my king is closer to the a5, so he was scared that maybe, my king is going to swoosh and pick everything up. It's not working. Anytime I try that, I get punished. Right? Me losing the g3 is the end of it all. Right? If I lose a g pawn, I lose. So he shouldn't have been afraid of that. So he decides to just start kind of wasting time, and he hopes that this is going to be a fortress. He was correct. This position is a fortress. Why? Because he always has 2 neutral moves he can make. 2 moves that don't change anything. Both king f6 and king e6 keep complete balance, and I cannot infiltrate, right? So there's 2 ways for me to win. Winning a pawn or infiltrating and zugzwanging my opponent. If he has 2 neutral moves he can make at all times, it's a draw, right? So my goal, this did happen. My goal is to make sure that he gets himself zugzwanged. Oh, by the way, I want to mention that the move c6 is already losing. I think there's only one way to make a draw, and that was to play b6. Now let me demonstrate why. So c6 is a losing move because my king is not going to try to go here. My king is going to try to go over there. If my king gets to c4, so let's say he makes a random move, my king gets to c4, now this is a Zugzwang. Because his king cannot stop me from coming through c5. Let's say he goes down, now he stops me from going through b6, I can pass a move and it's over, right? My king gets through, right? Now his king is fully passive. The next step, I can't win anything because his king is just gonna keep babysitting the b7 pawn. The next step is to push my queenside pawns all the way up, go b5. This triggers a series of trades. Black cannot avoid these trades. As soon as the trades happen, my king is gonna proudly march back to the side and pick up the e5 pawn. Black cannot hold it. If black decides to hold the e5 pawn, the b7 is gonna fall, like so. And consequently, if black decides to hold the b7 pawn, the e5 falls, and we have a pawn endgame with an extra pawn, which is easily winning. So going back here, after king d3, my opponent correctly so identified that, oh, well, he cannot let my king up. So he goes king d5, and now there's only one move that wins, and that is the move b3. I'm passing the move, and I'm hoping that his king goes back. If his king goes to the side, holding against the king c4, now I'm going to take a proud walk towards the h6 and win it. There's nothing black can do to stop me. My king reaches h6, and I queen my g-pawn. He goes h5, right? He also passes the move. It would be nice if I could play g4, but there's a big problem with this. He can just go ahead and ignore me and go h4. This, on the other hand, would also be winning for me because I have an outside pass pawn, right? Meaning that whenever we trade g4 for e5, his king is going to be way too far to help his queenside pawns. So this would be winning. It would be nice if I could have done this, but I can't. So I have to pass the move again by going b4. Now, c5 runs into a similar problem. I just go king e4. Either I win e5, or if he goes back, I win the h5, and I'm easily winning the pawn endgame.
Could you not have passed, or instead of before h5, could you pass with g4 and just fix the h6?
It's a good point. Unfortunately, now, as we pass with g4, my opponent suddenly gets an active play against my king c4, king c5. He himself is going to go all the way over, and we actually going to promote at the same time. Pawn race. That we're gonna draw the pawn race, but the problem here is that he has checks. The c6 is invulnerable. We cannot take here because we lose the queen instantly. It's going to be dances around the fire now. White is going to try to we're going to try to use the c6 as a shield, but there is no way. Actually, maybe there is a way. No, there is no way. There's still this check. We can also lose, getting ourselves checkmated. But yeah, g4 would be nice if not for this counterplay. This is why it was essential to actually use the b pawn for both passes, just to ensure that my pawns remain the same. He can't wait any longer. He goes to the side. If he keeps the defensive formation, I have another pass, which is the c3, the only one I need, right? I pass. Again, I pass. My king reaches b6. The rest is history. I'm going to show you guys the rest of the game real quick because I know that I'm taking a bit too long here. But I won the pawn race. The pawn race is going to be in my favor. We do queen at the same time, but I'm up a pawn already, and I'm also going to be up 2 pawns as soon as I capture the c6, which happens. It takes me a little bit to find the proper piece formation, but this is it. King b6, queen c5, and I'm going to be ready to take on c6 as soon as I play c3. Right, so the whole point is to make sure the b4 stays safe. Oh, my opponent made it easier, and here he resigned because he doesn't even have checks. This position would be difficult to win if I only had one extra pawn. I think most of these queen and pawn versus queen endgames are known to be drawn, but in practice they're very difficult to draw because you always have to check your opponent's king properly, not to run into a defense that's also a forced trade, you know, this kind of stuff. But if you have two extra pawns connected to each other, it's usually easily winning. The only exception from this rule is when you have two connected pass pawns on the A and B or G and H files, and your opponent's king is in the corner where it's supposed to be. Those positions are actually drawn for the defending side, and once again, it's very, very difficult to draw those, but those are actually theoretically drawn. This is not one of those cases, so it's easily winning. Okay, so that will be it for me. I hope you guys enjoyed the lecture. I'll pass the torch to, wait, is Denes next? Who is next?
Yes.
Oh, where is he?
I don't know.
Okay, well.
He hides around the corner or something.
Okay, makes sense. Okay, so stay tuned as my good friend and roommate, Grandmaster Denes Boros, is going to take over for his next lecture. And I'll see you guys tomorrow or, you know, whenever you feel like it. All right, peace.
Hi guys. Wait. Chris just closed the door on me. Chris Bird, Arbiter. So I'm trapped in here. Yeah, it's been down. The confessional loop has been down for a lot of the tournament. But now it's back. It's fixed apparently. Oh yeah, I should do a fit check first of all. To dispel any rumors, this is not a Christmas sweater. I walked in today and then I'm getting wanded, and Chris is like, Christmas came early. I was like, what? This is clearly a fall sweater. Like, look at the red, guys. The orange. Okay. And then I'm like walking to get my water, and Hans is all like, oh, Christmas sweater, huh? And then I'm like, what? And then, you know, a wonder meets me inside the lounge, and he's like, oh, I like this Christmas sweater. I was so close to losing it, guys. I walk back out with my water, and then Lev is all like, ah, such a nice Christmas theme. It was over, guys. Anyway, I've thrifted this. Pretty nice, right? Let's see. Oh, skirt from 8th grade. Shoes from my mom. T-shirt underneath from Uniqlo, because I'm a little basic like that. Honestly, like, sometimes I get a little bored, so I want to chat. But, okay, I guess it's time to chat about chess now. Yeah, kind of an interesting position. I just took on e7, so kind of the idea behind that is, you know, I think my knight on d5 looks really good. Bishop on e7 looks kind of bad. But the thing is, in these structures, you know, if she can keep the bishop, let's say if she plays like bishop d8 or something, I can never really go for that pawn on d6 because, you know, opening up the d file is good and black has a lot of control over the d4 square. But without the bishops on the board, then I have a lot more control over d4 and kind of over the dark squares in my position. And, you know, usually in these structures, it's kind of very, very reminiscent of a King's Indian, right? But I kind of feel that going for this, like, g5, g4 wouldn't be so good for her because the center is so open. Then in that case, if she's not really playing on the king side with her pawns, then it's a little hard to continue because I have such a nice grasp over d5. Yeah, then I'll probably start rolling on the queen side soon.
Hello everyone and welcome. This is the Masters class. We're going to discuss Carissa's games of recent. She's playing the Tata Steel Championship. She actually won the Tata Steel Blitz, but I believe that was played in India. I'm not going to discuss those games right now. No promises that I won't return and discuss it later. Now, so she's currently playing Tata Steel, which is the same company. I believe it's Indian, but they're playing in the Netherlands, traditionally in Zee, which was the original name of the tournament, and then renamed Tata Steel. So we're going to take a look at Carissa's game. Let's get into it. So e4, not much of a surprise. Carissa always been an e4 player. And by the way, she's also on the hunt of trying to become a Grandmaster. And she's actually doing quite fine. The difference between this tournament and a regular event you'd play is that these are 11 rounds. So a lot of rounds to gain steam and also to run out of steam. So it's completely different from your run-to-the-mill tournament. And it's not two games a day like you have in America, because in Europe they're pacing themselves. Especially here, 2 games a day and 11 rounds, that would be kind of tough. So c5, c3. Now you might be asking, well, how come she's playing the c3 Sicilian or the Alapin? It's all about like all the fashion that we have in chess. In Kasparov's times, everyone played the Najdorf, no questions asked. I mean, since Fischer, Tal has been very popular. But c3 is a surprise weapon, more or less. It's not as popular as knight f3, but has been getting a bit more popular. So it's not a bad surprise from Carissa. Now, I did not introduce Max Warmerdam. He is a Dutch Grandmaster. Carissa is currently an IM with a couple of norms. I do think that if she could get a norm here, that would mean a lot, especially if she would gain like 16 or 20 rating points. She'd get very close to the coveted 2500, which you need, plus the 3 norms to become a Grandmaster. So knight f6, d5 is the other main line, but knight f6 is a bit more combative. It in fact is somewhat of a mixture of an Alapin and the Sicilian. But c3 is actually not such a great move compared to what you see in an Alapin, and it also boxes in your knight. So e5, knight f3, d6, d4, c takes, d4. Here knight c6 is one of the main lines, but Warmerdam chooses e6. Also very popular. Nothing really special so far. It's very normal stuff. Now the difference is, and you might be wondering, well, how come Carissa got the chance to get her knight out? Well, what Black is saying that you are eventually going to have some weaknesses in the center, maybe even an isolated pawn. So for that is kind of why he starts trading on d4. Also, White does threaten a little bit to roll those pawns. So if Black does not pay attention, White might actually start. You could even take, but you can also start rolling. So Black is more or less forced to take. So takes e6, bishop c4, just pressing on the knight. It's sort of like a soft threat. It's not really something big right now, but White could decide to take there. Bishop e7, queen e2. And for example, what I mean by a soft threat, that you're not taking, but let's say if Black goes pawn to b6, sort of signaling bishop to b7, then White would definitely consider capturing. And with this bishop, well, already you might want to go here. But if Black goes here, then White was sort of justified to give up the bishop pair to ruin the structure and say, I'm going to have a good knight versus a bad bishop. I'm still might be letting some of those bishop a6 happen, so maybe rook e1 first, and then bishop f4 later. But the point still stands from a strategical standpoint that there is a threat there which you might just do if black goes for b6. So it's trying to stop black from fianchettoing. And Warmerdam doesn't really do that. He goes pawn a6, knight c3, and now we kind of get into a bit of an IQP type of position, which comes from like more d4 closed systems. White gets like a center control, but that pawn is as much of a strength as it's a weakness. So d takes e5, and I do want to ask you, how would you capture back if you were in the shoes of Carissa? And don't ask me, I don't know her shoe size.
Say pawn.
Pawn? Yeah, pawn makes sense. In fact, sometimes they do that. And what becomes the big question is whether the c3 pawn is going to be a bigger liability than your attacking chances. Because this e pawn often takes away all those key squares. The reason you don't get mated in most positions, because there's a knight there on f6 guarding everything, including the h7 square. So d takes e5 makes a lot of sense. She actually decides to take with the knight on e5, and this is more of the IQP type of position, meaning IQP is literally just referring to the isolated pawn structure. Now, the whole point being, black has a bishop stuck on c8, and if that's stuck, then the whole army on the queen side is stuck. Therefore, black is not quite ready to get active. Now, do you think black cares about a trade on d5? So we kind of generally no.
Because
Okay.
black just wants, his goal should just be to blockade the d5 square and try to trade. If he can trade all of the pieces and just, like, if it's just like the knight on e5 and the knight on d5, for example, then black will just be better. Because the d4 pawn will eternally be weak.
It definitely, Chet says that the bishop would get out, and that's one of the things that's true. Black shouldn't be too scared of it, but this is sort of twofold. And whenever there's a little bit of rating discrepancy, so nominally, Warmerdam is higher rated than Carissa. So going for these trades don't always favor the side who's supposed to be winning. So there is these expectations, and sometimes you just play the position. And that's actually kind of a different way of playing. Warmerdam chooses also just to play the position, goes knight c6. I mean, it is not tragic if there's a trade on d5, and I kind of agree with Chet that the bishop on c8 kind of gets to escape from its cage, and black is more or less fine. Now, oftentimes it does happen that white can claim a little bit of a tiny advantage because of those pawn weaknesses, but with accurate play, this usually fizzles out, and it's not quite enough for a win. So, she decides to take, b takes. And this actually is sort of our first moment before the battle begins. We kind of have to decide how are we going to set up our pieces as Carissa. While you all think a little bit about this. I'll answer a question. Why didn't Ivic play a random move so Ivanchuk loses on time? Well, so there is this vile mindset that we've gotten from playing online. It's been a bit, I wouldn't go as far as toxic. Chess is not really played at the high level just to win. They actually play to prove a point and to show that their position is superior. They're not necessarily interested in just winning. Now, obviously, nobody hates winning, but it's not just about achieving victory at whatever cost. And in fact, that should be the right mindset, because if you are winning and you're winning on time, you actually didn't prove the strength of your position. You only prove that you're faster. Now, for that, you can just become a sprinter. Just run faster, and congratulations, you ran faster. But chess is not about flagging. It never really was about flagging. Now, everyone uses the time as a weapon, as has been said by some legendary people, and it's used, obviously. They get into a situation where they can't figure out what to do, but primarily you should be playing to get a better position and win from strength. That's the goal of the game. If you're doing it the other way around, you're doing it wrong. Anyways, after a little break, any ideas what you'd play in this position for white? Yeah.
I might develop the bishop at some point.
Okay, you develop the bishop. You said knight e4 or?
Knight e4.
Mhm.
I could also see repositioning the light squared bishop to
Mhm.
d3. That diagonal looks pretty good.
Mhm.
I want to put my rooks on c1 and d1.
Yeah, bishop d3, eyeing that pawn. Knight e4, all been mentioned. Get this bishop out. Anyone concerned with some of our stuff? Knight a4 was also mentioned. How about rook d1?
The rooks on c1 and d1.
Mhm.
Great.
So rook d1 was actually played, and I like this move by Carissa. You don't quite know where your bishop wants to be, so you don't quite want to go to d2 because the d4 pawn is going to become a target. In fact, if you do, I can go knight b6, practically double attacking, and now you're in sort of a trouble. You're going to either lose the bishop pair or lose the d pawn. Bishop d3 might actually have some similar issues with knight b4. And the reason I'm fond of this move is that it just over-defends and just looks for action just after that. And it doesn't mean that any of the other moves are not good, just putting the knight on different spots. But what matters most is that you make sure everything's guarded. And after that, you can go on your own quest line. So pawn a5. And then now again, here's the big question, which way you want to go. Does a5 change your opinion on going knight e4 or a4?
I still feel like I just want to put my pieces in the center, but it's more tempting now.
Yes.
I will go
Mhm.
a4 because I see a plan that he might play queen b6 and change the
Bishops.
the light square
Mhm.
bishops,
Mhm.
and I feel like knight a6,
Mhm.
which will be
Mhm.
both that plan.
Yeah, I would say that both is reasonable. It's reasonable to go knight e4 and it's reasonable to go knight a4.
Does it also prevent the knight e6?
well, it doesn't prevent it, but they will have to deal with the trade. So knight a4 was played by Carissa, and so you could, and these are kind of like different types of playing chess. One of them is, I'm going to improve my pieces and they will prove superior, and the other one is sort of an interplay with your opponent. Because if you go knight e4, black might actually go pawn a4. So in fact, you are letting black do whatever they plan to do in the first place. Knight a4 is a bit more restrictive. Meanwhile, she also controls the c5 square. So bishop d6. Now she hops to c5. Of course, if there's the trade, you're not unhappy because you've got a pair of bishops. And this bishop on c8 is still locked in. Yes, black has a very nice knight on d5, but it is fairly symbolic. It doesn't really do too much. And the bishops are actually guarding all the key squares. So it's beautiful on paper, but it doesn't do much damage. So rook e8, knight e4. It's a little bit strange of a knight tango, but you'll see Carissa has a point. Bishop f8. Also, earlier on, the bishop was on e7, so she couldn't win time on it. But once the bishop moved to d6, she can actually attack that bishop. Bishop f8. Definitely rook d3, rook g3 becomes an idea. However, it's much stronger when the bishop is away, because the main target of rook d3, g3 is to press the g7 square. If you can't press that square, mostly it's not as strong. And here she goes aggressive, plays bishop g5, and that's a good move, because of course you don't want to go f6, because that would create chronic weaknesses around the king. If you go bishop e7, I might just trade you, and then I'll have firm control over the c5 square and the c6 pawn. So Warmerdam has to go queen b6. And now, if you know Carissa, then for you it's going to get easier to figure out what she's going to do. She actually is quite an imaginative attacking player. But no attack actually breaks through without preparation. So the question is, how can she prepare her attack?
Rook d3, queen h5.
Rook d3, queen h5.
Bishop takes 9 and then knight f6 check.
Well, yes, if e takes, then that could be an idea. However, also note that this doesn't work for a couple of reasons. Even this one doesn't work, because yes, the tactic works, but Warmerdam is going to get two pieces. But the idea is there, and also I can take with the c pawn. Now, never give up on your ideas. Just because it fails at your first try doesn't mean it's necessarily flawed. It could be, but there's no guarantees.
Actually, like makes me want to play queen h5 more. 'Cause then it actually works. Then knight f6, gf, bishop takes, and like queen g5 is pretty serious.
She goes rook c1 first, but then goes queen h5 next, yes. Now rook c1 is a move that cannot be bad. Defends the bishop, attacks the pawn indirectly. Bishop d3 would kind of rob yourself of all these ideas. So if you already move your bishop here, you commit yourself to attacking that way. So rook c1 is a very nice evading move on her part. I do think a4 was not a great choice by Max. Bishop a6 probably would be better. Just try to trade it. There's no guarantee that it's going to neutralize the attack, but if you actually manage to get rid of your worst piece, that definitely improves black's position. But he goes a4, which is ambitious, but it doesn't really help the cause of that bishop. But now Carissa does go queen h5, and it's, as all of you said, if black just ignores everything, he goes bishop a6, naturally she takes. And again, case in point, you guys are all right there. So if takes, knight f6, takes. And because black's pieces are way on the queen side, the queen and bishop practically checkmates all alone. And these pawns are in the way for this king to flee. If you go here, queen g5, and it's game over. You can't do anything. Again, note that the idea that didn't work earlier is sort of the key idea that would win the game for Carissa. So this whole combo of knight f6 now works because her queen has moved away from the e file.
Only one question. What if,
yes.
instead of bishop g7, what if black just played h6, king h7?
It's a good point. So takes.
I was trying to figure.
Now that's a great point, and of course h6 is there.
Queen g4, king h7.
So let's figure this one out. So queen g4, king h7, there isn't any direct way of winning, not on the spot. But let me calm everyone down. You don't need to win immediately. It's also not illegal. Yeah, you can just go rook c3. You could also do it immediately. And the problem for black, let's say they take, is that they're way too late to do anything against this. If you move the bishop away, you get mated on g7. If you don't do that, you'll get mated on g8. Technically, a double threat can't deal with that. And that's actually an important thing to remember. And of course, black could try to defend that, but that doesn't help you from getting mated there. There was queen f7 ideas. But case in point that I'm trying to make, if you have multiple threats, you're more than likely to win. If you have only a single threat, they can deal with it. Sometimes they can deal with two threats at the same time, but those are far and few in between. It doesn't always happen. And here you can just see black is overwhelmed by the threats, and the fact that black's queen is far away on the queen side makes it quite easy for white to break through. But here, actually, credit to Grandmaster Warmerdam, he comes up with a very creative defensive idea. So even though we're looking from Carissa's perspective, let's try to figure out a nice defensive move for Max. Is black just lost? Not quite yet, actually. So here, black has a cute little defensive move that actually keeps him in the game. Bishop e2, indeed. So the queen, this whole idea, so takes, this whole idea worked because the queen was near black's king. Bishop e2, and the whole point being f2 takes, e takes d5, and the previous trick is reintroduced. And black is not lost. Black still has some fighting chances, but Carissa actually follows up courageously. How would you follow up?
I mean, I was going to say, I didn't think this is knight f6, no?
Of course, knight f6, but they can take.
And then I was going to just say, I'm going to play queen h5. And
Okay, but I do take your bit. So you go here. I take the bishop.
Yep.
And
so I was going to check and then play rook d3.
now this is going to be a different ball game this time, because now I actually have back rank ideas, and you don't have that bishop there on f6, just setting up immediate meaning ideas.
Down an additional piece here.
And here's just one very, very, very simple move of queen takes d4. Now, tactics are important, because if you don't see queen takes d4, your defense will be much more difficult. And
Bishop g7, and then it's
yeah, I mean, obviously you're winning, but this is just GG, game over type of defense, and it's also just a counter tactic. So exactly, as a great point by Chess Lover there, hidden resources, they're undervalued, and they're actually fairly crucial the stronger you get, because sometimes that's the glue that holds the position together. And if you miss them, then everything crumbles. So hidden resources are something that even grandmasters actually don't appreciate as much, but it can be a make or break of a position. Like, many people lose games that is equal, but they would have to find a hidden idea, and then like in a practical sense, they're just lost. So takes, and she actually just goes bishop e3, and I like this.
she did sack on f6 though.
Yeah. Well, she was temporarily up a piece.
Right.
She gave it back, and technically she's not up a pawn, but his king is a little shaky. There's some double pawns there, and there's some weaknesses all around the board. It's an upgrade. It's not what you're used to seeing when you watch Carissa's games. She's not the one having the better pawn structure. But this time she does, thankfully for her, and she's doing fantastically. It's better, but it's not over yet. So f5, decent enough move. Queen h5, and the way you should be playing, you should be striving for the initiative, especially if your opponent's king is wide open. So this is queen h5, chapter 2. Queen takes b2, rook takes c6, rook c7, pressing all those weak pawns, activating her pieces. Queen f5, queen a2. And we kind of reach a position where black sort of gets some sort of play. It's still clear that Carissa is better. But these are the moments, if you start sort of slacking, then you might actually get into trouble yourself. However, Carissa hits on a great idea here, and I would invite all of you to try your hand at it. Because normally, if we're just going to wait around, Warmerdam is just going to push that a-pawn, ram it down the board. Any ideas? H4? And what's your plan? What do you think? Okay.
The pawn to h5.
Uh-huh.
I got stopped because I was trying to see
Push it
what
up.
we should have done if it's
Okay.
b3 and trying to push the a pawn.
Uh-huh.
But I got stuck over there.
Okay, well, would you stop on h5? Well, obviously you'd push it even further a little bit. Now, indeed, that's what she did. And these are the best moves in the position. Judith Polgar's coach, Lev Psakis, who was a very, very strong grandmaster, and in fact joined first in one of the championships with Kasparov, I think 82 or 83, not certain exactly, but he was coaching Judith, and he had that famous saying that if your move has multiple ideas behind it, that is a good candidate move. This one is exactly what you want to do. h4, it not only creates a luft for her king, but it also helps her attack keep rolling down the board. So rook b8, h5, h6. And, all is good. h4, h5 was a great idea. It put some pressure on Warmerdam. Didn't have time to push the pawn because had to react. But now what? g4, well, if you go g4, I might start attacking your rook, come back with my queen.
I wanted to play rook dc1 and then rook 1 to c6.
Okay, so one thing, like all these ideas, they're interesting, but you do have to factor in what your opponent would do. Because if you go rook 1, rook c1, rook c6, if I don't do anything, there's queen b1 check, trade queens, it's done for. Yes?
Bishop take h6.
Bishop h6, okay, bishop takes.
And then
Queen
queen g5 check.
g4, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay, I move my king in a corner, so takes here. Now, just a disclaimer, you cannot checkmate the king with your lone queen. Now, it doesn't mean that what you're trying to do is wrong. You might just want to involve more pieces. So I'm not saying that it is downright bad. I'm saying that probably queen g4 check is just not quite enough.
Just rook c6 right away, actually.
Rook c6 is definitely one move. As I said before, never give up on your ideas. I can't repeat that enough.
Bishop h6, bishop h6, rook c6.
And that's correct.
Pretty tempting too.
And that
Which one
would...
with I guess rook c6, f6.
So
But that looks...
So the big question is, so if bishop h6, you're tempted and you are sure that it's good, why would you go for rook c6 then? Or at least that's sort of the question I'd ask.
It's safer?
It is safer, but I mean, this is sort of that question. If you are certain that this move is winning,
You just play it, obviously.
then why don't you just play it? And in fact, you were right when you said bishop h6, but you do have to play rook c6. And the idea is, here, then you have h6, and you're just winning here, interestingly enough. Here, check, now you have mate. Now, one thing is to see bishop h6, but then combine it with rook c6 is not apparent necessarily. So there is, I wouldn't say it is obvious. And in here I have to connect with something that's been going rounds on the World Wide Web, saying, oh, why should you just not care about tactics that are random? Well, this one would win the game for Carissa on the spot. And, you know, they're saying, oh, but these won't work out, said Carlsen. But what if it does? And a value of a game is quite high if it's especially the critical one. And in this case, it didn't quite matter because rook c6 is equally as good. But not every position is like this and so forgiving, quote unquote. So if you hit on an unusual pattern that actually is incredibly valuable, unlike what they're saying, and I completely disagree, because if you now know that this pattern is most probably winning you the game, and the other one doesn't win you the game, in fact, I wouldn't be the person saying it's not a blunder. I would say it's definitely a blunder on your part of not executing if you were in the know. And I don't think that having the mindset that, oh, I actually just didn't look is enough. If you are a professional player, not taking a look is a mistake. Well, guess what engines do? They look. And sometimes they find something. Now, to be the devil's advocate here, for the other point of view, who says, well, why would I look at bishop h6 if 90% of the time it doesn't work? There are players, including the ex-world champion, who often likes to build his game based on intuition. But what if that 1% is wrong? And what if that 1% is the 1% that matters? Then it all falls apart, right? It only means that it just doesn't work then. So, sure, there are cases when your intuition will defend you, but what if you actually miss out on a great opportunity? So it goes rook c6. She goes rook c6 and it's fine. But as it turns out, this does win. Maybe she underestimated this. And it does feel very slow. In fact, it's just quick enough. His pieces are still far, far away from defending the king. So rook c6 is good enough. Queen b3. Rook a1, queen b5. You know, we still got some work to do. Not Carissa, because I assume she figured it out by this moment what to do.
I mean, it has to be rook h6, right?
Yeah, rook takes h6. It is begging to be played, but you know, if you played well, then your pieces will actually be cooperating. Of course, if takes, you're going to get mated here. It, again, sort of a double attack, because even if you take away the f, like with f6, the g5 square, I still have g4. So you don't have enough ways of stopping me. My h-pawn stops any of these rook lifts. So that actually shows how powerful her play with h4, h5 was, because it actually restricts Max's defenses. Rook a1, I think, is being asked why rook c1 wasn't played instead of rook a1. And I would say that rook a1 was sort of played so it's not in the way and it can be attacked. It doesn't mean rook c1 cannot be good, but I think that was her idea. So Max goes rook d8. And that's actually a clever move. In some sense, grandmasterly. Never underestimate a fianchetto bishop. If they're still alive and kicking, they're going to be able to defend the king. There is no immediate checkmate because the bishop is such a good defender.
Just bishop
bishop g5.
Queen h7, queen h8.
Now bishop g5, again, I don't mind bishop g5.
Yeah, I just want to play queen h7, queen h8.
Well, that doesn't quite, if you want to go queen h7, that doesn't work because I will have the g7 square. Yes.
h6 doesn't work.
Yeah. I don't mind bishop g5. For as far as I see, I don't see anything wrong with it. But she actually has an even more powerful move. Any 2000 rated? I'm pretty sure we've got 2000 rated, at least strength-wise, in the audience. Well, online versus over the board?
Yeah.
That is a question I'm going to leave open. Rook f6. Okay, but, you know, if we think about it, is that an offer I can refuse or something that I can't refuse? Okay, but I will defend it and offer you a trade of queens.
Same with like rook g6.
I will take, definitely will take that rook.
Yeah, I guess still just queen b7.
So you may not want to be that generous.
Yes, just rook h7 is boring,
Yeah.
but good.
I don't actually agree with the boringness of rook h7. It kind of is cool. Her maneuver of rook c7, c6 takes rook h7 is actually somewhat of an unusual one. In fact, it reminds me of an incredibly famous game that was played between Keres and Smyslov, where it famously didn't work out as planned. But here it actually is surprisingly effective because the bishop has nowhere to run to. So she's going to get her moment of capturing the bishop. So queen d7, obviously she takes, king takes. And we need to try to continue with the attack. First moves are usually fairly easy because it's quite intuitive, but sooner or later you will have to calculate a little bit at least to succeed. So usually chess is sort of a synthesis of these two ideas. You need a good intuition, it's good to have a good intuition, but you will have to figure out the details at the end. H6. You're forcing the king away so she can get her queen on an ideal spot. Exactly. If queen g5, then black can go king h7. And yes, you have this check, but so what? I can actually station on white squares. And by the way, that's a good way of playing against a dark squared bishop. Pose your pieces on the opposing color squares. And a king is not as easy to get captured that way. And this is a bit slow because I'm actually having guard on rook g6 and, as already mentioned, the white squares. So h6 is sort of forcing the king away, and queen f6. And it's sort of a rude awakening for the Dutch Grandmaster because the king barely can find safety on the e-file, and she's also threatening just to simply push the h-pawn and promote. Yeah, h7, even check, but you know, if you can promote to another lady, you do it. So, seeing more or less the inevitable, Warmerdam is trying to minimize casualties and goes queen e6. And these are the finishing touches from Carissa. So queen. Mm-hmm.
If king e8, e8, I think just h7.
Okay, I can still walk my king away. Like, you check me here, h7. I still have those double rooks guarding. So it's not like you're going to promote easily. Queen h8, king e7,
bishop g5,
f6.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Queen g7, king d6. And I was trying to find it. King d6. Where is the mate?
You don't always have to mate to convince yourself that you're winning. Yeah, you can go there, here, check, and there's eventually a mate. But, I mean, if you're acting more of like a pedestrian, I mean, check probably is even more accurate. But even if nothing happens, check. Can check and win the queen. I just win the whole house. But even if push comes to shove, you can just take the rook, then push the pawn. Even material, but with the king wide open. Obviously, rook c1 is to be preferred, but whenever they're calculating, they do want to realize, okay, am I winning? Is this going to be checkmate, or am I winning with simple moves? Which is actually quite important to note, because if you don't have a mate, you at least need to win some material. So they just need some assurances that she's still winning. Now f6 wasn't played, and the game sort of fizzles quite quickly. She took the rook. He already resigned after bishop takes d8, but so if they take here, here, queen trade, we can just trade. If you go here, then everyone's favorite endgame trick would commence. h7, of course, because this pawn is untouchable because you get checked. Therefore, seeing all of this, of course, you go here, I defend this end. This is just a hopeless ending. There's not much you can do here. Carissa has billions of pawns. The only thing she needs to do is just bring her king up, and she gets the point. Warmerdam was not interested, so he actually resigned at this point. Now, I do want to say, before I close this lecture, that this tournament is still going on. She won a couple of games, including this one, and if she keeps winning, she has a fair shot at a norm, a GM norm, in this tournament, but there's a lot of rounds ahead. As I said, it's 11 rounds, so we shall see. So thank you so much for coming, and hope you enjoyed this game by Carissa.